Hello friends and welcome back. Today's video is a little bit late, but I thought better late than never. Today I want to talk about my top 10 favourite children's books from 2021. Now I am a fairly new children's bookseller. I've been a bookseller for a few years. At the end of last year I moved into a children's bookstore. So I have been trying more and more to read a lot more children's books than I did before. I have long enjoyed a bit of middle fiction, a bit of YA and some graphic novels, but obviously that is becoming more and more a part of my reading. Anyway, all of that to say, I have 10 books here that just really stood out to me last year as being really quite special. I have some picture books, I have a graphic novel, I have quite a lot of middle grade and some YA as well. So a nice big spread for you. I don't really have them in order of favorites because they're all just so different and they're all for different readers as well. So instead of doing these in order of my favorites like I have with my other wrap-up videos for 2021, today I think I'll just do it sort of vaguely in order of the age groups. So we'll start with the picture books. The first is Jumping Joeys by Sarah Allen. There's something about this that I just love and I can't quite put my finger on it. Basically, it's just a little story about different marsupials and their babies. It starts as the sun is going down and all the animals are starting to come out. It's quite simple language, it is rhyming, which I love, and the art is just really lovely as well. I think the thing that took this book above and beyond for me, like that took it from a great picture book to an amazing picture book that I love, is right at the very, very end. There's what the author calls a furry field guide, in which there's little illustrations and then a bit of information and the full name of every animal that you might have spotted throughout the book. So nice and simple, but just absolutely gorgeous, and I love it. Next is When We Say Black Lives Matter by Maxine Beneba-Clark. Maxine both wrote and illustrated this one, and it is huge. The illustrations are quite simple, very vibrant, and they really just allow the words to shine because that is like the message of this book is just really important. And essentially it is explaining the rally cry, the movement Black Lives Matter to young black children. Maxine recognized that, you know, seeing a lot of Black Lives Matter stuff on TV, hearing a lot of the dialogue might be quite confronting and challenging to young black children, sort of wanting to understand why we need this language without, you know, just totally scaring them, like sort of justifying and validating their lived experience while also providing hope and, you know, a celebration of black identity. That is essentially what this book is. It's so well done, it's really powerful, it's really moving. So while it does touch on police brutality and explains that in a way that is accessible to young children, it also just really affirms and celebrates them, their communities and their families, and it's just beautiful. Our third and final picture book for this video is Somebody's Land by Adam Goodes, Ellie Lang and David Hardy. This is a beautiful picture book, essentially telling the truth of colonization of Australia. It tells the story of invasion and colonization and dispossession, and it tells it honestly. And I think one of the really powerful techniques used in this picture book is the repetitions of the lines, "They said it was nobody's land, but it was somebody's land." A really strong reminder that I think the Australian fallacy that we so often are taught in school but continue to perpetuate, that Captain Cook just stumbled across Australia and he didn't know that there were Aboriginal people living here. It was an honest mistake, a misunderstanding, when that reality is just not true. And it really peels back the layers of just like how much harm that lie did and continues to do and will continue to do unless we tell the truth. It's done in such a beautiful way, a way that really opens up the floor for conversation between children and guardians, and I think that is a really powerful and important thing for a picture book to be able to do. And I love that we end on the affirmation that it was Aboriginal land, it is Aboriginal land, and it always will be Aboriginal land. Okay, now we've got the graphic novel pick. This is Lightfall, The Girl and the Cauldron by Tim Provitt, and this is book 1. We're expecting book 2 hopefully this year, which I'm really excited about. I love this book. I actually discovered it well before I started working in the children's bookstore, and it just captivated me. The art is gorgeous, and essentially is a story about this young girl called Bee, who is like off on an adventure, a bit reluctantly, but off she goes, and she comes across this sort of creature who becomes her friend, Cad. It's a really charming story, a bit of an adventure story with two unlikely heroes, and just like the friendship and connection that they develop is really beautiful to watch. On top of that, I think the reason that this feels so special to me is that Bee struggles with anxiety, and the visual representation of that in the graphic novel is, I think, so powerful. It's beautiful. It really captures just how debilitating anxiety can be, how it can stop you doing the things that you want to do, how it's not something you can just decide to overcome. But it's never a hopeless story. It's just really, really well tackled. So if you're looking for something that's like fun, adventurous, you know, some good friends going on a weird adventure time, but also has quite a lot of heart and even a little bit of like a mental health message, this is absolutely the graphic novel for you. Next, we're on to the middle fiction, or the middle grade. The first is Dragon Skin by Karen Foxley. This is such a beautiful book. This is the first book that I picked up when I first found out that I was going to be working in a children's bookstore. It's a fairly new release by a fairly well-known author. I haven't read any of their other work yet, but this was beautiful. It's basically the story of a young girl who finds an injured baby dragon, and she decides to sort of take it in and try to take care of it and heal it back to good health. She lives at home with her mum, who she loves a lot, but is feeling quite disconnected from since her mum has a fairly new boyfriend who is quite abusive. So it does tackle themes of domestic violence. It's done in a way that feels very honest and authentic, but not gratuitous at all. It's sort of more in the background and like mentally affects our main character rather than, you know, big scenes of violence. It's really well done. The atmosphere here is just perfection. Pip, our main character, is also sort of struggling at school and with friendships and stuff, because we find out throughout the book that she did have a best friend who's no longer, who left the town. We sort of don't know what happened to him, but his absence has definitely impacted Pip and her self-esteem and her desire to connect with other people. So she's sort of navigating all these big emotions while also secretly trying to take care of this dragon. And like this mystical element is like a small, fairly symbolic part of the story. But like I said, the atmosphere, the tone, it's just really moving. It's really beautiful. I think that this book is perfect for children who are a little bit more introspective, a little bit more quiet. It's not some big grand adventure story. It's a lot about friendship, about love, about grief, and about taking care of yourself. It's just really heartwarming. It's gorgeous. Next up is Bindi by Curly Saunders. This is a middle grade written in verse, so it's a really quick read. It's got beautiful illustrations throughout as well. And it's basically like the year in the life of an 11-year-old girl called Bindi. She lives at home with her family. She's Aboriginal. She goes to school. She gets into ruckuses with her brother and her sister. She doesn't like math so much, but she loves art. At one point she breaks her wrist, which she's really obviously upset about, but she also around the same time finds a little bird who's also injured, and they sort of help each other heal. And then towards the middle or the second half of the book, there's also a bushfire that comes through Bindi's town. It's devastating, and Bindi sort of goes through a range of emotions of obviously fear and worry, but also of confusion, because as an Aboriginal girl, she's been told by her elders and her family that fire is an important, powerful part of culture and taking care of country. And so she's just confused about, you know, why fire is being so dangerous and harming the people that she loves and the town that she loves. And so even though it's not the whole book, it does become a really beautiful like message in the book about the importance of understanding and incorporating and listening to Aboriginal knowledge. Bindi is just such an alive, beautiful character to follow throughout the year. She's just a real girl living her life with the ups and downs that come along with that. And it's just really, really beautifully done. As I said, the artwork throughout is gorgeous. Next up is Wandi. This is by Fawel Perrette. I have read this author's, a couple of the author's adult fiction books, which I really enjoyed. This is her first children's book, and it is beautiful. Basically, this is the true or fictionalized, but based on true story of Wandi, an alpine dingo, and it follows him when he's a cub living with his family up in the mountains. Through quite a tragic set of circumstances, he gets separated from his family, and eventually he ends up getting like found by a human. He's very young and can't take care of himself, so he gets picked up by this human who ends up taking him to like a dingo sanctuary. And they're really excited to have him because up until that point they thought alpine dingoes were extinct. So to find a cub in the wild is proof that they still exist and proof that they and their ecosystem need protecting. Dingoes are a native Australian animal, but they've been very much demonized throughout white settlership. And so this book is really encouraging children to fall in love with dingoes and want to protect them because they're so important to the ecosystem of Australia. And you will absolutely fall in love with Wandi because he's beautiful and he even has his own Instagram page, so make sure you follow that too. Next up is Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson. I actually picked this up from the shop I ended up working at months before I got the job, or even knew that I might ever be working in a children's bookstore, which I think is quite funny. This is a beautiful story. It's sort of Jacqueline Woodson's memoir in a lot of ways. It's told in verse, and Jacqueline basically just covers her childhood and what it was like growing up as a young black girl in America in the 1960s and 70s. And what I found so incredible about this is that it does not read like Jacqueline today reflecting as an older woman, older than she was, with the wisdom of age, with perspective. She's really captured the heart and soul of a young girl. And because she captured that youthful innocence so well, sort of witnessing her come into contact with racism for the first time at such a young age, and how that almost violates that innocence of this child. I think that's really cutting and powerful in a different way than if she'd written it looking back, as the woman she is today, looking back on those experiences. That's just incredibly well done. You really feel like you're reading from the perspective of a young girl. She also talks about just family and memories and loss and growing up during the civil rights movement and religion and just all different kinds of experiences, but it's all told from the perspective of her younger self, and I just thought it was moving. And then The Boy from the Mish by Gary Lonesborough. This is such a beautiful coming of age YA novel. This is definitely, I think, more appropriate for 16 plus, just because of the content. There's some, more explicit sexual content. In this story, we follow Jackson, who's an Aboriginal boy. I think he's 17. He's about to go into his last year of high school. And it's Christmas time, so all of the family sort of comes to the Mish where he lives. He lives in a small town. He's got some mates. He's got his cousins who, he loves and adores. But he also has some dickhead racists in the town who give him a bit of a hard time. At Christmas, when all his cousins come, there's a new boy who he's never met named Thomas. Thomas is another young Aboriginal boy around the same age, but he has recently gotten out of juvie, and he's sort of been assigned to Jackson's aunt, who is just taking care of him so that he doesn't get stuck in the prison cycle, encouraging him to, get interested and pursue art, for example. And although Jackson is quite reluctant at first, it soon develops into quite a close connection between the two boys. So although this is an incredibly beautiful Aboriginal queer romance, I would not say that this is necessarily a romance in the stereotypical sense. Even though the connection and the relationship between Jackson and Thomas is gorgeous, it's so real and authentic and just beautiful and believable. Really what this is about is two young Aboriginal boys learning about themselves and coming to accept themselves. Jackson in particular is really nervous about the way that his family and his community will respond to him, exploring a different side to his sexuality. And this is really the journey he takes to not only opening himself up to love, but also of figuring out what kind of man he wants to be and how that fits in alongside his Aboriginal identity. Gary Lonesborough has said that he's written the book that he really wished he had as a young Aboriginal man figuring out that he was gay. I love how clumsy a lot of the language is. It just feels so real. When Jackson is sort of interacting with other friends and family, they're a bit clumsy with their language. Maybe they don't say the exact right thing, even if they, have good intentions. And I think that's indicative of the fact that they're sort of all figuring this out together. I love too how this demonstrates such beautifully healthy, respectful, interactive relationships between the young Aboriginal people and the elders, and how masculinity in particular is explored as well throughout. I think this is just one of the best books I've ever read, certainly one of the best Australian books, and I wish more people would read it. It is gorgeous. I honestly can't think of any criticisms. The way that it's written, the characters, everything feels so real, so authentic, so beautiful, so heartwarming. It's just incredible. Okay, so a little bit late, but those are my top 10 favorite children's books of 2021. I would love to hear what you think if you've read any of these, or if you decide to pick up any of these based on my recommendation. But I think this video is long enough, so thank you so much for watching. I will talk to you again soon, and until then, so much love. Bye.